Good evening once again on the 23rd of September 2020 and our DAC series number 52 with the amazing, really forthright speaking person in the audio business, Mr. Robert Scovill, and his thoughts on the new digital consoles and as well as the process and the philosophy behind it. And we are continuing with him in the second part of this series, and we'd like to welcome everybody back and at some point also invite Robert back into this conversation. Guys, if you have any questions, please send them to me on the question page separately so that we can have Mr. Robert answer them in case you have anything in mind. Up till now, he's been really forthright, really giving his years of experience out to you guys. So, for all of you who are out there who want to pursue a live engineering career, these are things to really imbibe and listen to carefully. That's what I would say. Uh, Mr. Scoville is there, so let's invite him. Thank you all for joining us back. I hope you all have tea and coffee with you. Waiting for Mr. Scoville. Hello, Camille, Alok. I saw some familiar names who were there earlier and are back again. Dev, Prabodh, Ranjit, Tanu is there as well. Audio mechanic Danish, Vivek. Okay, we are waiting for Mr. Scoville to join us. Oh, he's unable to join. Let me try again. It's really early morning for him. Robert, there you are.
And we're back.
And we are back after the break. I hope everybody stocked themselves up with tea, coffee, or whatever other fluids that you need in the
Whatever stimulant that works
stimulants,
for
yeah,
you.
you need for various parts of the day all over the world that we are in. So, have you found this very interesting, Robert, that in today's, especially in this lockdown, I mean, and I'm sure you've been doing that session with the lab as well, I've noticed, and other webinars with David that you've been doing.
Yeah.
How crazy it is that we are in this one part of the world, like I'm here where it's about 8 p.m. and we are talking to people all over the world, whether it's night or day, and we are just communicating with this whole lot. I mean, which was earlier we never thought of it that way.
You know, you would think, KJ, given that we could do this, the world would be a better place. Don't you think it would be better?
I think so. Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, wow. I mean,
I
it just
always
blows me
said
away.
communication is the key.
Yeah,
Well, it's like we can communicate like we've never been able to communicate before.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It,
I have high hopes for it. I think the
yeah,
world is. I mean, the world is a very small place now. You know, I mean,
absolutely, absolutely. And this has last 6 months have proven it to us without a doubt
without
that
question.
without a doubt, and that's what I'm finding very interesting in this series that I've been doing and connecting with so many people across the world. My God,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
I thought,
think about the alternative. Think about how horrible this lockdown would be if we didn't have this capability.
absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, without question, many of us would not have jobs.
Oh yes,
I
yeah.
mean, you know, the funny part for me working for Avid, I mean, I've always been a remote employee. You know, I've always worked
Hmm.
from home for them. So that part of my life has not really changed at all. As a matter of fact, I have more work than I can do. You know,
Same here. Yeah,
but
yeah, you're right.
the
Working from
touring
home.
part of it, all that stuff, that's all settled down. You know.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, Robert, my question was to do with so much work that we do here in India, and I wanted your expert 40 years behind it into this was, see, when when you are as a live sound engineer, when you're mixing bands or when you're mixing artists, say on a particular genre or style, you end up setting up the sound, the PA, and then you end up setting up the sound when you're doing line check. And since you know the band, you're actually setting it up. Let's say it's a rock band, so you know the rock sound that you need to for the listeners out there,
Yeah.
which is great. Now, once you've got that basic sound, then, like you said yourself, that it's very important for the mixing engineer to then mix the band, but the sound is set for the rest of the evening. Unfortunately, for most of the Indian acts, which are specially to do with the film industry that we have when we have shows, we actually, I mean, I used to be FOH for Mr. A.R. Rahman, the biggest exporter out of India, and his shows would be, say, about a set of 30, sometimes 40 songs long, and each one was a different genre.
Yeah.
There was a rock song and would be followed up by a totally romantic ballad and followed up by a totally Indian based kind of a sound texture. So sonically, every song was different.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had a really tough wall in front of us to kind of do that in analog
Oh, doing
initially.
that in analog. I mean, doing that
Yes,
effectively in analog
yes.
would be, I don't want to say impossible, but almost, almost.
And of course, when digital came, we all breathed like a huge sigh of relief to be able to snapshot it, to be able to design things around it. But it was still a challenge. I mean, because imagine going from a hip hop sound straight into a romantic country ballad kind of a sound. The next
Sure.
song itself, you know.
Completely
So
different palette, completely different
and
motif.
so that's like throwing up a whole bunch of a different challenge altogether in terms of how do you tune your PA system in the beginning to kind of factor for all these things in, or do you kind of just leave it in a particular way and then actually do it from the console? What would be your advice on that?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of gets back to some fundamental philosophy that I have on PA tuning to begin with, which is I have a tendency to lean more toward linear in the PA, meaning
Okay.
what's coming out of the console is what's coming out of the PA, much like a
Mm-hmm.
control room. Now
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that I don't have, especially for rock bands, I don't have the bottom end bumped up, to create some power and some impact in the PA. I absolutely do that. But what I guess where I'm heading with it is what I want is the ability to do is change things dramatically on the console and not rely on the PA to make those changes apparent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
if you've got a PA that's tuned around the bass drum, you're not going to be able to make the changes that you are talking about making for that artist.
Right. Absolutely.
It's
Yeah. I
not going to
won't be.
work.
Yeah.
Those changes have to happen on the console. I'll tell you where I run into that kind of thing, and it's a challenge to manage it even in digital, but you have to manage it. Is doing award shows,
Oh,
like
exactly.
doing something like the Latin. I do the Latin Grammys every year. Their Person of the
Uh-huh.
Year show and a bunch of other stuff, where you might have an incredible range of artists that are going to come up on a given night. I mean, the last time I did Person of the Year, I mean, it was, once that show starts, I think it was 14, maybe 15 different acts in an hour and a half.
Yo, wow.
I mean, you are going from mariachi band to Latin pop star. I mean,
Pop
at the
star.
drop of a hat. So you got to be able to,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be able to do that very thing right there is be able to
Right.
manage
Yeah.
those different genres. But I'll tell you something else, KJ, and I know you know this because just from talking to you, I know you know this. Like I said, mixing is a listening skill. And, in my clinics, one of the things I'm always promoting to people is you want to become a better mixer? Listen to more music.
Mm.
Listen to more music. And,
Yeah.
you want to become a more adept mixer? Listen to all different styles of music and start to understand what makes a genre tick musically. What are the key components
Yeah.
of this in this music versus this music?
Right.
Because it will absolutely stop you from one approach works for everything. You'll understand immediately that will not be the case, and it will not work.
Absolutely. Oh, that's
You know,
that's
you've
very
you've
true.
got to understand the sensibilities of the music you're mixing, no doubt about it.
Oh yes, no doubt about it. I mean, I was lucky working with AR on the front of houses because a lot of his songs I had mixed in the studio. So with him
Totally.
to, to take that same sound on the road was easy because he and me and another engineer of his, Mr. Sridhar, who passed away some years back, they had a long relationship. And I think both of us, actually, for the first time, I think there were two FOH engineers for his shows because of the. So we had 114 inputs coming from the stage,
Nice.
so there were one huge Midas console, there was another Quest audio console, we were subgrouping stuff, and all that in the analog days. And for quite a few years, we carried on analog.
Yeah.
And we divided our duties, and we kind like you had your guy, and we had
Yeah.
both of
Yeah.
us, and we were doing those duties with him. So our job became slightly easier because we had mixed the songs between the two of us, so we could actually know exactly what he was trying to get at in terms of the soundscape and everything. So yeah, but I do imagine sometime I came up with stuff that I had never mixed, but I had to just mix the show for them. That time it was tough. So I would always say, you send me your music. I mean, you need to send me the stuff you've done. I need to hear it. I need to figure out, I need to plan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, like you just said, listening, that took a lot of time. I mean, that was my major investment rather
Yeah.
than doing the show was in this,
I
you
mean,
know?
time permitting, like if I'm being asked to mix an artist, especially if I've got enough lead time in terms of weeks, I literally will put their entire catalog in an iTunes library
And keep
and just put
listening.
it in repeat, and it's just playing
Right.
constantly in the office or wherever I'm at in the house until that show comes. Because you kind of need to build all these subconscious triggers,
Yeah,
where you
absolutely.
just kind of go, ooh, yeah, I know what's coming there. Hang on, and if you kind of get some sense of that, and when they're building it, you can make it happen. I think probably the best example I ever had of this, and I had always believed this, but it sealed the deal for me where I was like, this is absolutely true. Was when I was working with Tom Petty, we did a run of 22 nights at the Fillmore in San Francisco.
Whoa.
And we had every 2 nights, we had a different opening act. And every
Wow.
night of the shows, all 22 nights were different in terms of the set list, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that would happen on those nights is that somebody from the opening act, usually the main artist of the opening act, would come up and join the band unrehearsed for 2, 3 songs, And
Wow.
I mean, they had never ever played it before, but they would walk up on stage and the artist would go, well, let's do this one. And they'd call it out and play it. So
Okay.
I just remember having this moment of, okay, I've never mixed this song, but you kind of had to kind of look around and kind of pick out what was on stage and go, okay, I think I see what's going to happen here. And then when the song started, you had this immediate of, oh, I know this song. I know
I
this song.
know.
Hang on. The piano drives this. Let me get,
Right.
it was musically driven. It wasn't technically driven at all, on your moves. You had to understand, oh, there's a backing vocal coming. I know it. I know the song. I know how he's going to sing that.
Right. So that's important.
You got to build instincts. You got to build musical instincts into your mixing. It's not just a technical workflow. It's about music.
So when you say the engineer is mixing the show, so that means if the engineer, live mix FOH engineer, is actually sometimes ends up writing the gain structure, writing the dynamics of the band, you think that's okay because they might be
I
slightly different from what the band is trying to put out, but you are actually in a way overriding that sometimes because if you make the wrong decision at that point of time, you could be doing the other thing what the band is wanting to do.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily we're in an age now where I say luckily, maybe it's not lucky, where everybody's recording the show, everyone, and they're videotaping it and recording it.
Right.
And I was talking to who was saying this the other day. Oh, I can't remember who I was talking to. It's going to come to me. They were talking about working for Katy Perry.
Okay.
Oh, it was Toby Francis. I was talking to Toby.
Okay.
And he was talking about interacting with Katy and her, like her whole judge of whether the show was a success was on the sound that was being captured by the iPhones in the audience. And while
Whoa.
this sounds crazy, she made a really, really valid case for it. She was like, okay, look, here's the deal. There's only 16,000 people in the arena listening to the show, but everybody's recording it on phone, and another 30 or 40 million people are going to hear that, right? So that's what I care about. It's got to sound good on the phones. And that kind of set the tone for how the show was mixed in the arena. And, you know, obviously it would impact how you're going to cover the arena in terms of audio. You know, you're going to pay way more close attention to the people that are up close in terms of audio up close.
Yeah,
all kinds of things, you know, that it changed the whole dynamic of what was going to take place there, you know. And I remember thinking, you know, that's spot on. That's legit. I hate it, but it's spot on, you know.
Wow. I mean, she would actually, after the show, I mean, get somebody's phone and actually hear it. I mean, she would actually do that.
All she had to do was go to YouTube. Everybody was posting it.
Everybody would be posting it, right?
Yeah. And she made the valid. And, you know, I used to make this point with Tom, you know, and he definitely came around on it after a period of time, you know, very, very early on. It's just like, dude, even like the things you say in between songs and, you know, the things you say night to night, you're going to have to mix this up. Because after the first night, your entire tour going forward has already heard it.
Yeah.
You know, there's no surprises at the shows coming. They all have heard it, you know.
This is I mean, this is such a deja vu thing, because right now what we are going through in this lockdown is identical. Like, if you've done one show digitally online, how are you going to make it? I mean, earlier you could take one show and go to different cities because there was a different audience.
Yeah.
But here you have maybe the same audience again and again. So how are you going to mix it up?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge for I think the challenge for the artist is off the hook, you know. I mean, gone are the days where you're just going to go out and design the show and, you know,
just
this is what we're going to do here, and it's just going to stay static for 3 or 4 or 5, 10, 12 months, you know.
You're right so much. We did that on the Jai-Ho tour, and when we were doing the US and everywhere. We went into the stage in California and we rehearsed, and then we went to Maryland, we rehearsed there, and then we just took that show out on the road, the same show.
Yeah.
Clocked with the time code, because there were a lot of things flying with the time code, and it was identical 1 hour and 35 minutes every day.
Well, I actually think that part of it can work. Like, there's nothing wrong with having the program, production, etc. But the place where it kind of falls down is the interaction between the artist and the audience. Because if you're just saying the same line every night, it comes across as very insincere at some point.
You know? Absolutely.
So, you know, they have to be way more in touch with the audience and have some genuine interaction with them night on night. And I think that puts incredible pressure on the artist because, you know, I mean, if you've ever stood on a stage with the spotlights on, you know, they can't see anybody, you know, I mean, you know, they have no idea whether the audience is reacting well or not. And then on top of it, put ear monitors in, and they're disconnected even one step farther from the audience.
Totally isolated. Yeah.
You got to really pay attention to that. And the artists I work with, I encourage them. I say, don't get locked into too many things that you're going to say between the set. Just let it be natural. I mean, you can have some of it staged. Don't get me wrong, but on whole, you've got to make that night look unique to that audience. You know,
each audience. Yeah. That's the ticket. Yeah, I do agree on that. Robert, what's your take on the consoles have progressed? You know, like, of course, you remember your first venue console, and let's say your the Yamaha before that, right up till now, let's say just before the lockdown. So there has been this huge arc of progression, and you said it yourself that we've really got up to speed in so many things in the digital era and the digital console.
Yeah.
But what do you think about people who are using those consoles? Have they also managed to get on that curve and grasp it and come up to speed with it? What is happening in that department?
Actually, I was shaking my head, but it's actually two answers there. I mean, I think the technology has far outpaced the users in many ways. And I say that for all the users, for sure. And because, you know, it kind of gets back to that choice fatigue argument again, where, you know, there's so many options to someone who is new on the console. And there are so many, I'll call them distractions, that you forget, you know, it's easy to kind of push audio basics aside. It's easy to stop listening and just start doing, because there's so much to do on the console. It's probably the most discipline it takes is to, and I try to promote this in my clinics. At some point in the show, stop mixing and just listen, right? Don't look down at the console. Matter of fact, just step back 4 or 5 paces so you can't do something on the console, and just listen
To what's
and
happening.
make sure it is what you think it is.
Ah,
I mean,
yeah,
you've got to do that. You got to be disciplined enough to do that at times, where
very
you just
true.
kind of go, wait a minute, let me just stop working and actually listen for a minute. Is it actually what I think is happening here? So, that's a piece of it. But in terms of the arc, I think it's going to sound weird coming from the gray-haired guys. The older you are, the harder it has been to acclimate to this, to these changes. Whereas if
All
you're
right.
young and this is all you've known, it's easier to acclimate to
Easier
it.
to do that.
I use
Okay.
my own kids as the example there. I mean, for
Mm,
my kids, cell phone, computer, those things are as
right.
exotic to them as the toaster is to me. It's just a normal thing in their life, and they just get acclimated to it very quickly. And young engineers are that way with digital. It's like that's what they have to operate, so that's what they do.
Right. Okay.
But you always got to get back. The audio fundamentals will never go away. There's no
Right.
plug-in to change audio fundamentals. Things like phase, magnitude, things like those. Those things are not going to go away. And right now, the unfortunate part of it is now in digital, we can do so many things that are so disruptive to the phase and the impulse of a mix coming out of the console right now. It's mind-blowing. And I am amazed at how many people I see that just do not respect that aspect of digital
Spectrum.
consoles and don't take care of it.
Mm. But where then do you think it's a good advice to go to a school and learn this, or do you think it's okay to learn on the job and figure that out?
I honestly think it's both. If I was,
Both?
for people that are coming into it, although subtract the pandemic and the lockdown out of this, okay,
Hmm.
let's take it out, because the whole game has changed right now.
Right.
But pre-pandemic, I would have recommended for somebody who's thinking about getting into this, thinking about getting into audio, let's just keep it at audio, thinking about getting into audio, I would say to them, okay, what you need to do is go out and find any kind of audio work you can find. Doesn't matter
Hmm.
what level it is. Go get immersed in this in some way, because audio is a dark art. It's a black art. You can't touch it. Like lighting, we can see the effects of what we're going to do. In audio, there's so many mysterious things happening in audio, and it's so counterintuitive that you
Mm.
can't grasp it early. But go out and get some work. Go out and do some work and get your hands on it, and then go to school. Because
Oh.
once you get to school, then you'll start. School will serve as a way to answer these questions that you have. It's like, why
Mm.
when I add more speakers does it sound worse? All of a sudden you will get the math. You will start to understand the physics of audio a little bit, and you'll get answers, and you'll retain the information way longer than you would if you just go to school and there's all of these kind of abstract things that are being presented to you, and you think, wow, really?
Right.
It's like you don't believe it really unless
Mm.
you can get some real world experience with it. So I always say to people, go out and get your feet wet with this. Go out and mess it up a whole bunch of times, and then go to school.
That's a very interesting take on that, Robert. Never
Yeah.
thought of it that way. To actually do some work and then go back to school on that,
Yeah, then
rather
go to
than the other
school.
way, because keeps doing it the other way around. Go to school and then come out to work.
Yeah,
And
well, the thing that you can't, the thing that the schools kind of confuse. I don't want to be too hard on the schools here. Overall, they're doing a fine job, but they confuse knowledge with experience.
mm,
You can have all the knowledge in the world with it, but until you get the experience, it's not going to
that's no
help
point.
you. It's the oldest saying in the world. It's one of my favorite sayings of all time. Is experience is what you get right after you needed it. You know, I mean, that's how it works.
Wow, it brings back so many memories.
It's what you get right after you need it. So, you know, the thing I'm always telling students that are in school is like, look, you're going to come out of here with a really, really nice set of tools. You're going to come out with a nice, shiny toolbox full of tools. That does not make you a craftsman yet. You know, you've got to have a lot of hours using these tools to
Using
become
tools,
a
right.
craftsman, you know. Nobody that comes out of school is, building Golden Gate Bridge. You know, you have to have years and years of that. And, you know, the thing is, and it's a function of society, right? Where everybody who's young, and I was just as bad when I was young, you want to get to the top very quickly. I want to succeed very quickly and have a long career. But the thing is, you've got to have this legacy of failure in your work,
Your work,
because
yeah.
that's what you learn from. We learn way more from failure than we do from successes. And you've got to get out there and really mess it up to really understand what you need to be doing, you know. And you want to do that when the spotlight is not on you, right? I mean, you want to do that
Yep.
when nobody's watching, and you want to get out and really just make as many of those mistakes as you can when nobody's watching, or when the stakes aren't as high, and
Right.
you learn from those things. You know, I mean, it's just the truth of it.
That's great advice, Robert, I must say. Yeah, that's great advice for guys who are listening in. I think it's very important to keep that in mind. Uh, Guys who are wanting to look at a career in audio, and I think a majority of you who are here are actually there for that purpose. So what Robert is
I
saying
actually,
really,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I think what you just said makes so much sense, Robert, without
But
a doubt.
I think the flip side of that is the people like you and me need to mentor those people and give them the safe place to fail.
True.
Right?
I
We
mean, yeah,
have to be the guy that goes, no, you don't want to do it that way, and here's why. I'm going to show you why.
mhm,
You know.
true. No, you've already been doing it, Robert, with your beautiful seminars that you have, and when you travel when you and I
Yeah.
remember the times that you came to India and you did those seminars. They are really imprinted on my mind. I mean, there were so many things to learn from just the few hours that you were here. I mean, that itself, kind of validates so many things. It kind of sets so many things right, which might be skewered in your head. Always having a mentor or somebody talking about from their experience, I think just kind of connects the dots with people sometimes. You don't have to ask sometimes, but they just
Yeah.
talking or just hearing kind of just clears things up, cobwebs in your head, which is what I call them. So, yeah, personally to me, that happened a lot just listening to what you were saying. And you've been, like I said, doing it for so long. And even right now, you're carrying on with the lab, interesting projects that you're doing with that. And people are listening in and, you're mentoring those guys. I think that's a beautiful thing. And
Well,
wow.
one of the funny things about the lab is that's always been kind of a dream of mine to do that kind of thing. I've just never had the time to do it.
Fine, yeah.
But I've always felt this way about teaching anyway. I've been very, it's like I love teaching because I'm the one who does the learning.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. Same reason here. I'd love to do teaching just because of this. What are you saying?
Yeah,
Exactly.
because I'm one of these
Totally, I
people
get it.
that's like, I'm not going to stand up in front of somebody and say it unless I can back it up,
I get
unless
it.
I'm pretty darn sure that this is the way it works and this is the way it goes, you know. Because
Yeah.
again, this kind of gets back to young people, you know, where you have to be careful with them, you know. And I was a victim of this when I was young, and partly because of the era that I grew up in, but also
Mm,
partly because of people stating things as fact that were not facts, you
other
know.
than fact, yeah.
And you kind of, when you're young, you're very impressionable. Your hard
Mm.
drive is nowhere even near full, so you remember everything that is taught
Everything.
to you. And I still, to this day, this just happened to me a few months ago where I had to retract something that I said because it was something I was taught when I was young that was absolutely wrong. It was 100% wrong. And here we are 35, 40 years later. I repeated it and had to go, no, wait a minute. I know that's not right. Hang on. I got to go change that, you know. So you have to respect the young mind, especially with regard to audio, in terms of what you place in there. Because, you know, in the early days of me starting out, there were no schools. There were no schools. I mean, you
Right.
were reliant on someone to mentor you along and take you there. And I have no bones about saying I was really, really fortunate, really lucky to be allowed into a group of men that were in this business that mentored
Mm,
me along. And the longer I've gone, the more blessed I feel about that period. It could have gone completely different.
absolutely.
And I would
Yeah.
have, I mean, I saw so many people that didn't have that opportunity when I was young who never really went anywhere with it. I was very, very fortunate to be around some very, very well looked after people, very capable
That
people that were willing to
that I
share it.
think that makes a huge impact. Like you said, an impressionable mind. That makes a huge impact who you are with and how they are dealing with you and what they are teaching you. I think even now, think about it, Robert, 35 years later, that thing is still imprinted in your head and you
Right.
remember it so vividly, so clearly,
Yeah.
that's the impact it has. So yeah, you're right.
I mean, I think the
One has,
most important thing mentors taught me in my early days when I was very young, I mean, 19, 20, 21, on these tours, again, and I was lucky to be around the right people, had nothing to do with audio. They taught me how to be a professional.
personal,
This
yeah,
is how you handle yourself. This is how you act in this situation. This
absolutely.
is where you are in the pecking order. Don't think you're
Mhm.
higher than you are. All of those kind of things, that they led by
Right.
example. It wasn't like we were verbalizing
Yeah,
this, but you just watch how they handle themselves and you kind of think, okay, yeah, okay, I see how I'm supposed to be handling myself here. I mean, it was
but Robert, that's something
incredibly
no
important.
school teaches. I mean, that's something I've learned that I used to do a small thing like this at one of the institutes called the aesthetics of studio because I was dealing with studio environment, and this was one of those things I used to talk about, and I did that because I realized that no institute talks about this.
Right.
Only through experience, your mentors, the guys who are you with at that point of time, they are the ones, like you said, lead by example, and then you watch it and then you kind of imbibe it. But in a school, nobody teaches you this. So people who have not had that experience and come out straight from school have no idea about this part of the world,
Right.
how to do this. And
Yeah.
that's when a lot of them falter.
Yeah, the studio's an incredible example of it because in America, at least the guys that I've been around, we always call it being able to hang. Like you've got to be able
Being
to
able to
hang
hang
and not be a disruptive force in the studio. You got to be a supportive force in the studio.
all the
And we
time.
go
Yeah.
back to that example of recording vocals. Every session I've ever done, when it came time to record vocals, that is given the most respect and the most, like, you've got to do this just right to be able to get
Mm.
this performance out of this person here. And
Mm.
I'm a Nazi if I'm producing or engineering the session in terms of what that artist can see going on behind that glass when we are sitting in that control room.
We should not be doing a project together, Robert, because we'll be two Nazis.
Maybe that's how they get rid of both of us at the same time, right? I mean,
Oh,
I
I can
just
see
will
that
not
in the screen.
tolerate any of it. Any of it. You
Yeah.
you want to get gone really, really quickly. Just be on a vocal session and not be doing the right thing, man.
I can imagine that. So, Robert, where are we now with the live business? Of course, right now we don't know when it's coming back and how it's coming back. Any predictions on this? Where are we headed with the entertainment business on the live side post whatever is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's still such an unknown. I mean, it just is. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is uncharted territory. We've never seen anything like this in
Like,
entertainment
yeah.
where it's shut down. I mean, I think in the context, and take this for what it's worth. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not any of those things. I'm just the audio guy. But from my vantage point, looking through my windshield, this is what it looks like to me: is that the only way we get back to work on any scale is when there is immediate result testing available.
Mm-hmm.
Waiting on a vaccine to get back to work, forget it.
Forget it. Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to see if you're going to do that, you're not going to see us back to work for a couple of years here. But if they can
Mm-hmm.
get to the point where, like what they're doing in Taiwan and parts of Asia, where you can, when you enter the building, you can have an immediate test, even if it's within 5 minutes of getting the test. They can put you off in another area till your test result comes, etc. You have an app on your phone, all of those kind of things in play. If we can get
Right.
to that point where we can kind of equate the metal detector with detecting the virus,
Right.
and
That's
you
a
can
good
get a
analogy.
lot of people in a space and be relatively assured that nobody's infectious, nobody's asymptomatic, things like that, then we will go back to work. And I think we're close to that. I think we're closer to doing that than we are to a vaccine, honestly.
To a vaccine. True. I think that would really help. Robert, what are your go-to seriously tools that you carry with you? I mean, something. What's in your bag when you go on a concert? I want to know that.
What's in my bag? Well, this is going to sound totally corny, but a smart computer, a computer running smart. I mean, especially in digital consoles now, the ability and the need to be able to look at things in transform and being able to analyze latency. I mean, it's so much of the whole game, not only in the PA system, but now at the console level. So I'm on record as saying this, so I'll just repeat it. I've said it to many people, and they've bristled at me saying this. It's like, look, folks, if you don't understand the concept of FFT in the year 2020 and how to use these devices, you're not an audio engineer.
You have no business being here in this audio business.
Yeah, you're going to make so many mistakes, it's not even funny. And everybody kind of takes that the wrong way. That that the FFT tells me everything I need to do. The FFT doesn't make a single decision for me, but it helps me get to the answers quicker than I ever could on my own. So, that's job number one for me, is to have that device available to me to use anywhere I want to use. I mean, it's my toolbox in this day and age.
Right.
Sure, that just little tools are just little noise generators and things like that I have. In terms of audio tools, I mean, in digital, I have every audio tool imaginable available to me. I don't have to carry anything other than an iLock,
That's true. But what about building FFT analyzers or maybe a smart in-console so you don't have to carry this?
Yeah, I think we'll get there. Sooner or later, we'll get there. It's just a matter of processing. And again, that could be one of those things where, you want to build some kind of unity across console lines to be able to count on there being some sort of FFT, some sort of time analysis on the console. Yeah. I mean, we're just on the cusp now. And this is important context to remember now. All of the digital console manufacturers, all of them, are just now on their second generation of digital consoles.
Okay.
Right? So even though we kind of think of this thing, it's like, oh, why can't they get this right? Man, give it time. I mean, we're just on the second generation. I mean, I even look at S6L versus Venue at Avid, and I just think of all of the lessons that we learned, all of the really hard lessons that we learned in that first console that we solved with S6L, So it's going to take generations of this to do it. And probably the best example of that I can come up with is the concept of putting delay compensation in the consoles, and being able to do that effectively for live sound. Because it's a very, very tricky thing to do for live sound.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do it in Pro Tools for the studio. But now in live sound, where, if we change latency and we change the throughput of the console midstream, we may be changing the alignment of a PA to an acoustic source. In monitors, we can't be using lots of delay compensation in monitors, especially for people that are on ears singing.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to have delay compensation handling that there. So, it becomes, if we're syncing audio to video, oh my goodness, game over.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very aware of what is going on with it in terms of that. But that said, we're just on the cusp of it now, of consoles of a generation that are going to be able to offer comprehensive delay compensation on the console. So it's a really, really important marker in terms of console development, especially
but Robert, how's it going to work?
I
mean, if you have delay compensation happening, like you just mentioned, I mean, in terms of sync issues and stuff like that, how are we going to work with?
What you're going to have to do is just be very cognizant of things that you add to your signal chain that are going to impart latency. You just have to become aware of it. And, you're going to have to make a decision at some point. Am I going to use this processor and possibly disrupt the phase or the impulse of my entire mix, but keep it in sync with the video? Like, am I going to be allowed to align it and go out of sync, or am I going to have to penalty of that
Right.
keep it in sync, or do I just choose not to use that processor because it's
That's it.
video production? Those are all these things
Okay.
you're going to have
Those are
to
the
balance
choices. All
now,
right. Okay.
you know.
All right. Okay.
And
Those kind of things.
it puts even more pressure on the console manufacturers, especially in those situations for monitors and for
Yeah.
video work, which streaming is going to be now.
Yeah.
Right? Every one of our
Absolutely.
live mixes is going to get streamed now.
Stream down. Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's
Yeah.
going to have to be a sync take place there, a resyncing of that audio now. I mean, it's going to, how are we going to do that? You know, I mean, we've been saying it for years. I mean, you know what it's like at live shows, especially with live shows that have a lot of live video content,
Video.
right?
Oh, yes.
The question is, why is the video out of sync of the audio? Well, move closer to the stage. It'll get better, you know. You know, I mean, the idea of syncing a live concert in video with the audio in the room is an impossibility. It's not going to happen. And, you know, but what it's driven is the ability, what we've needed is the ability to shift video sync, not audio.
Mm.
We need to make the audio the constant and then sync video to it,
Get to that.
right? It's completely reverse of what has happened
Reverse.
over the
Yeah.
last 30 or 40 years where we're syncing audio to video. What we need to do is sync video to audio
Wow.
in live, you know. So that's a much dicier proposition.
Yeah. What were you thinking when you actually thought of actually doing the virtual sound check, Robert? I've been meaning to ask you that. I mean, where did that come from? I mean, believe me, when I first used it, I mean, actually used about it, but you know, when we first actually recorded the band, and then when the band went away, you could actually do things in terms of processing, fine tuning.
Yeah.
With the, I mean, that's when it hit you. My God, this is such a huge facility that you can utilize and do things. So, what was going on in your mind when you thought of that?
You know, I've told this story before, but it was a totally a situation of, you know, necessity being the mother of invention. It was survival. It was absolutely survival. It really was developed in the Tom Petty camp. That's where I came up with it. And I was very lucky that certain technologies were available at the time to do it. So here's the kind of the Reader's Digest version of this story.
Okay.
So Tom and his management had been kind of recruiting me for a while, and I just had other tours. I wasn't able to go to work for him. So I came in once it did open up and I was able to do the shows and the tours. There was this expectation of me walking through the door that it was going to be something special. You know, they had been trying to get me to mix their shows for a while. So there was an expectation that was Tom had just released a new record. Nobody knew how big it was going to be at that point or anything like that. But we went into rehearsals, and I mean, I can remember, you know, just kind of getting some sense of what we were going to need. I already had an input list from a previous engineer, et cetera, had designed a system. I was going to do what I had been doing up to that point, which is not be in the room with the band. I was going to be in a separate room on a pair of control room monitors in a very controlled environment, just getting sounds together and practicing mixing, you know, just like I had always done. But in this, I think for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe it was probably 2 weeks if I remember right, before we went to our first show. And the thing you got to understand about Tom and the Heartbreakers, at that time, they had already been together for 15, 20 years, you know, so they knew each other's moves.
Yeah.
They knew the songs they were going to be playing. And when we got in the rehearsal spot, you know, it was like on Monday, they came in and the band starts filtering in, they start jamming, they start playing some cover tunes, etc. Well, by the time Thursday comes around, even Friday, I remember thinking, I haven't played a single Tom Petty song yet. You know? I mean, here we are. We're just a few days away from starting the tour. And I just had this kind of moment of absolute fear of just like, I might get to the first show and have the band's manager and Tom's wife, no less, standing right behind me, having never mixed a Tom Petty song. You know?
Yeah.
And And it really struck fear. Figure something out. I've got to do something because I know what's going to happen now. They're going to wait until next Thursday, and then they're going to run through the set, and I'm going to have one shot at these songs. You know? So, I mean, my studio background came into play. I was just like, I got to be able to record this and play it back. I've got to be able to do it and get in here and practice and work on sorting this out. I mean, it's not like I had been mixing the band for 10 or 15 years. I had no idea what I was going to run into. So luck would have it. At my studio, you know, we had both analog and digital, and the ADAT, the blackface ADAT had just come out. I mean, it had not been on the market more than a year at that point, for sure. But I had already bought into it because, you know, I kind of saw what was coming. I was like, oh, I'm going to give that a try. And I already had a 48 track ADAT.
Oh, wow.
At home. My wife's going to hear me tell this story here in a second. So I'm in Los Angeles. This is Friday in Los Angeles. And again, just kind of luck would have it. I was mixing on a Gamble EX56 that had patch bay built into it, you know?
Yeah.
And it had big multi-connectors, et cetera. So you could, you know, and with these big tie line bays into it. So that worked out to my advantage with it. So I called my wife on like a Thursday night or a Friday morning or whatever. And I said, okay, here's what I need you to do. I need you to grab a screwdriver and I need you to go in the studio and I need you to take out all of these tape machines. And I need you to send them to me in Los Angeles. Overnight, I'm here. I need them here tomorrow.
Whoa.
And I had also contacted the sound company and said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I need a multi-core that's going to go to EDAC, blah, 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 blah. I need this here Monday morning. Matter of fact, you can get it here with me on the weekend. We can set it up on the weekend, which I think we actually did. So all of this came together in about 48 hours, you know, and I got the machines there. And the way we did it, you couldn't do this without digital. With analog, you just simply would not work. We basically, with the patch bay, created a second insert point for every channel on the console, right? So you would go preamp, you know, high pass filter, polarity switch, and the send point would be there. So you would send from there to the tape machine and then return it back to the console. But if you were going to have processing in there, if you were going to have a gate or a compressor, that return path would go to the compressor, the gate, and create the chain, and then go to the return, right? So the tape path, the playback path was pre-all insert processing. You follow me there?
Yeah, I follow
so,
that.
You know, with ADAT, as long as you were sitting on input on the machine, as long as you were recording in input, no big deal. You're not going through the DACs. You're not going through anything. I mean, it was just like you there. But when the band stopped playing and you stopped recording, now you go to repro, just rewind it and put it in play, and you're on the console mixing just exactly as you heard the band there. And it was an epiphany moment, you know, where it was just like, wow, this actually works. You know, as long as you got the record level right, as long as you had your high pass filter set where you wanted it and the polarity right on the switch, then all was good, because you couldn't change that in playback in analog. You know, that was the same thing that changed with digital. We actually had control of the entire chain in digital. But I did this, and it absolutely saved my career there. I mean, it saved the job for me, because I took the tracks that were recorded in rehearsal, got to the first show, used those tracks to tune the PA system, and had an incredible first show. And you know, their management, everybody was just like, wow, man. I mean, even Tom's wife went back and was like, you're not going to believe what's going on out there. They were just like, that's the best first show we've ever had, bar none. You know, so it kind of validated the experience. Now, that said, I didn't tell them about it at all. I didn't tell the band about it. I didn't tell management about it. Nobody about it, because I was really uptight about how they would feel about it, you know. But kind of the cool part of the story is I think probably for the first 2 weeks of the tour, I was just recording over the same tapes every day, you know. Like record that previous night, use them the next day. But then the other light bulb came on. The second light bulb came on, and I went, "Oh my gosh, we need to be keeping these recordings. What are we thinking here, trashing these every night?" And especially with a band like Tom and the Heartbreakers, because you know every night had kind of a unique flavor to it. It's like we need to be recording all of this and keeping it. So then I had to kind of reveal to the management what I wanted to do. And get them to buy off on supplying the cost of the tapes,
Across
etc.
the tape.
But here's how that works out beautifully. And my pitch that I made to him was actually spot on. It was one of the best pitches I've ever made, where I said to them, look, Tony, Tony was Tom's manager. I said, look, Tony, these recordings mean nothing right now. They mean nothing right now. But in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, these are going to be absolutely gold. These are going to be gold.
Right.
and that's how it's turned out. Like, Tom, they're getting ready to do the re-release of the Wildflowers record, which was originally supposed to be a double record. So they're going to release it as a double record, and there's an entire recording of all live material from that era that were done on these ADATs.
My God. Wow.
So, that whole thing, the virtual sound check, totally cool. Multi-track archive, totally cool as a package. That it just changed how I worked going forward for the next 10 years until I got that into the Venue console. At some point I moved away from ADATs in the late 90s and into Pro Tools, where I had a 64-track Pro Tools rig that I was carrying out to do exactly the same thing. And that's when I knew. Honestly, that was the moment where I kind of went, okay, this is going to change the game. When people start working this way, this is going to change how people work and do live sound, So that was the other part of the meeting with Dave LeBolt, where I thought, I kind of had that in my pocket, just thinking, okay, wait a minute now. Once we integrate Pro Tools to a digital console here, this is going to make virtual sound check just unbelievable. I mean, this is going to change the whole game here. It was cool.
But
it was a cool time.
Absolutely. I think is one of the coolest feature of this entire working in the digital domain, especially on the Venue, is going to be, for me, is the virtual sound check. It's fabulous, Robert, and thanks to you. Wow. I think this is indeed a game changer. So what is happening with other consoles? Does this concept kind of port itself across to other consoles as well right now, or no?
Well, I mean, to varying degrees, yeah. I mean, look, in 2005, no one was doing it other than DigiDesign, and now everybody offers a virtual sound check option. But they're in varying degrees of effectiveness. I mean, just being able to play back is not the entire piece of the puzzle. You've got to be able to play back in a meaningful virtual sound check way, where you cannot distinguish operationally between the microphone and the track. That's the goal. And that's not always the case in some of the implementations that are out there. I still think, Avid is doing that probably the best of anybody out there. There's some good ones out there now, but I still think Avid probably does that the best, because they manage input gain changes back to the the whole idea of, being able to navigate a Pro Tools session via your snapshots, being able to immediately recall a snapshot, go to that location in Pro Tools and go to work, those kind of things. That is really
those integrations are really good.
Yeah, really amazing.
Did you actually file for getting a trademark on your work there called the virtual sound check?
Well, you can't. Well, actually, I did. I looked into it. We looked into it as DigiDesign, and you couldn't trademark that term.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm still in disbelief what I was told. Trademarkable, etc.
Strange. Wow.
I don't even think it's patentable, because it's just like, well, you're just returning a tape machine back to the console and.
But it's still a term.
We've been doing that in the recording studio for 100 years. So what's new about this?
Maybe you should have called it something very exotic, which they would not have an objection to. Yeah,
the quantum flux recording technique. Yes.
Yeah, that would have got you that trademark there, Robert. So maybe something else that now that's.
I'll come up with a smiley face T-shirt. That'll be my claim to fame. All your other work is gone. He's remembered for the smiley face.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, 23 years with Tom Petty. I mean, that would have been that's quite something, Robert. I must say that's really a long innings. That you're almost like a member of the band, just like George Martin was with the Beatles. I mean, 23 years with the band is a long time.
I have so many funny stories from when once I actually revealed what's happening. The first time it was revealed to him, he kind of had this moment of where he wasn't really processing it, but he kind of got it all of a sudden. He was like, you know, I've never been able to be out front and hear what my music sounds like through a PA system, let alone my voice and everything else.
Wow.
You know, it was
And now
all of a sudden that studio workflow showed up in live sound where he and I sat there listening to the tracks going, well, how about if we do this, you know? All of a sudden he was very engaged in that. Aware of it. And, you know, the band just never came in for an actual sound check anymore. We just did virtuals. But we were up in in a place called the Gorge in Washington State, which is this big outdoor venue that sits right on the edge of a big canyon. And it's out in kind of the middle of nowhere. And there is a vineyard there, and there's housing on the vineyard. So when the bands and the crews come in to do this gig, that's where they stay, right?
Oh, okay.
So we're on the show day. I'm in virtual sound check, and I'm playing stuff on the PA and listening to it, and my phone rings, and it's Tom Petty. I'm like, so he's up on his balcony, about half a mile away, listening to it. He's going, hey, roll that back, man. Play that again. I want to hear that again. You know. So here we are having this conversation. I mean, it was the first remote mixing for sure. You know. We're having this conversation on the phone. He's like, yeah, play that back again. I want to hear that guitar part. Hey, just solo that up. Let me hear that. You know, it was just like, just come on down to the gig all day long. But, you know, he was on the balcony doing it. It was hilarious.
Enjoying that. Yeah. Wow. Okay, Robert, we have another hour which has gone so fast and so beautifully that we didn't even realize. We have finished our second hour up on this. And at this point, I would really, really thank you for your time, sharing your memories, being so honest, upfront, forthcoming with everything that you were asked. And I mean, this was just amazing, Robert, for all of us who are watching, who are hearing, and I'm sure who will watch later as well, because this will be part of my IGTV that will stay there and people can come back and watch. So I think there's so many gems, nuggets inside this that I think every time somebody watches, they can take away so much from it on every time that they see it and watch it. So thank you once again for doing this. And again, this part of your, I think, the teacher inside you, which is coming out, and we are so happy that it's coming out.
Well, thank you, KJ. I mean, dude, I don't mean to get this all sentimental and stuff, but you know, I knew from the first 5 minutes I ever talked to you, I was like, this is my kind of guy right here. This is my kind of guy.
Absolutely.
I mean,
this is my kind of Nazi.
I mean, if you lived close to me, we would be hanging out together all the time. I'm just saying.
We will, inshallah. Inshallah, we will hang soon.
I can't wait to get back to India. I love coming to India, so hopefully
we're waiting for you.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. So thank you so much for this. I'm always honored to hang with you.
Thanks so much, and a big love and hugs to everybody in the family.
Likewise
to everybody for being there with you and making it happen. So good night for us and good morning for you.
All right, my friend. Take care of yourself. Please stay in touch.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much. We'll stay in touch.
All right. We'll see you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Very much appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.